From round 7, I'd like to look at the game between Gukesh Domaraju and Anish Giri. Now let's look at the tournament standings before the start of this round, and you can see that neither player doing absolutely brilliantly. Anish Giri has started the tournament with 2 out of 6. Not great for someone of his standing. He's one of the top seeds in this tournament. And Gukesh, well, he's on 3 out of 6. Of course, it's not a bad score. However, if you saw his last game against Abdusatorov where he blundered in one move, well, that's a tough one to take. So how would he manage in this next game? And watch out for a nice think and drink moment, which features one of my favourite themes in chess, and I think it'll gladden the heart of every regular PowerPlay Chess viewer. Gukesh opened with c4 and e5, claiming centre, and very quickly we go into basically a reversed open Sicilian. A reversed classical dragon, actually. And Giri plays the trendy bishop c5. In years past, it was always thought that this knight had to retreat. But in recent years, of course, with the help of computers, it's been discovered that it's possible to leave the knight on d5 for the time being and play bishop c5. d3. Castles. Now, castle's kingside here is the normal move, but very quickly Gukesh played queen b3. Now, this has never been played before in this exact position. I mean, I find it quite a strange move, to be honest, because very often the queen can be attacked later on by bishop on e6 or potentially a knight coming to d4. But it does put the question to the knight. And, well, Giri played fairly conservatively. One could actually play bishop e6 in this position, but it starts to get very, very complicated after this move. But, well, typically, as I said, Giri plays a very sound and safe move, simply dropping the knight back to e7. And as I said, for me, the queen is on a slightly odd square on b3. But, well, nevertheless, let's see how things developed. Castles. h6. Well, I often have strong words about such moves, but it's very likely that a rook... I'm struggling with the names of the pieces today. That a bishop will end up on e6 attacking the queen, and in that case, it's useful to prevent knight g5. But again, let's see. a3. So the queen is probably going to drop back to c2, and then b4 will come. But Giri leaps in with knight d4. Absolutely typical for this kind of position. This is the slight drawback with playing this kind of formation, the dragon formation. Because with the bishop on g2, then you have to be careful about playing e3, which leaves the d4 square available for black. And after this exchange, then this pawn cramps the pawn on e2. So this is very typical strategy with this kind of pawn structure. So the knight moves to e4, hitting the bishop, which dropped back to b6. So now you can see that bishop e6 is going to come with tempo, hitting the queen, and then the bishop will probably stand very well on d5 actually, just blunting the bishop. So queen dropped back to c2. And, well, instead of moving out this bishop, Giri played a5. So good move, because very often white likes to expand on the queen side, playing this kind of minority attack. So a5 just starts to cramp those two pawns, so that's absolutely normal. Bishop d2 and a4. I mean, at this point, I'd have said roughly balanced chances, but black is certainly not worse here because of this clamp on the queen side. You know, I rather like this. Bishop b4. So there's a bit of a pin there. So the rook just steps to the side. That's where the rook wants to be anyway. Knight c5. So the knight hits the c5 square, as we see so often in this kind of position. And Giri decides, well, don't want any more pressure here. Let's just take it off. Fair enough. And knight f5. So the knight clears the e-file and also just protects that d4 pawn. Bishop e4. Slightly funny move, actually, moving the bishop away from in front of the king. It's also slightly vulnerable there, but you know, maybe in some positions he might want to exchange off, but seems unlikely because that would expose the king on those weak and light squares. So yeah, I don't know about bishop e4. Then again, I'm not exactly sure what white should be doing here. I mean, maybe something like rook e1 and perhaps b3 to open up some lines, but I don't know, I'm not completely convinced by this. I'm not quite sure what white should be doing, to be honest. But bishop e4 looks odd to me. And Giri played rook a6, and I rather like the look of this, because that rook could find a useful square. Well, in fact, on any of these squares, maybe even after h5, it could swing across to h6. So very interesting. For example, rook e1, h5 is kind of appealing. So Gukesh, after thinking for over 12.5 minutes, played e3. And that's, again, quite a double-edged move. I mean, you could say that it solves the problem on the e-file, so there's never going to be pressure here. But those pawns are slightly vulnerable. Also, you know, the white's king is less secure, although not immediately apparent because, well, now the queen connects with the king side. F-file is open. So there are dynamic chances. But after queen g5, well, I like this move a lot because it's starting to look at white's king side. Rook f4, but, well, those bishops are pretty good. So Gukesh certainly has counterplay here. b6. So that if bishop b4, so got to be careful now. c5, that could be taken. I mean, white may be okay here, but it's getting tricky. I mean, the bishops are very strong. White's major pieces are pretty good here. So there's definite counterplay. But after b6, Gukesh did not want to retreat his bishop and instead played queen c4. Now, I'm not going to say anything more about this position, but I would like you to have a think. I'm going to have a drink of my tea. And it is black to play. What did Giri play next? And I gave you a big hint in the introduction. Actually, there's a really beautiful thematic move for black in this position. Black to play. See you after this message. Do you want to improve your chess? Get exclusive access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Get hot opening ideas. Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month you get a newsletter with a detailed test game to gauge your standard of play. A monthly video with puzzles to test your calculating skills. A monthly opening survey where I give my take on a hot variation. Access to an archive of over 100 opening surveys. Access to video playlists so you can research your favourite openings using the PowerPlayChess archives. And as a patron, you're able to join in the exclusive live masterclasses where you can ask me questions directly. All this for only $25 a month. That's exceptional value. So do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Enjoy the benefits and improve your chess. By the way, patrons, in case you missed it, we'll be posting the masterclass that took place last week in its entirety on the Patreon site. So do stay tuned to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Right, let's get back to this position. So what did you come up with? Well, first of all, we need to see what happens if pawn takes bishop. Well, in this case, it's possible to play bishop takes knight, and the bishop is overloaded. Well, not exactly overloaded, but if bishop takes bishop, I mean, this is a possible sacrifice. This is tricky. Black certainly has compensation here, but white should also be all right. But that's possible, but it's not best. Okay, so what about moving the rook, taking it away from the queen? Rook a5, also very reasonable, particularly as that connects the rooks beautifully. But it is possible to take on c7. Quite a messy position. But the best move is rook a7, as Giri played. This is a beautiful idea. So at the moment the rook is pretty blocked in, but after the bishop moves back, this is what happened. c5, and that rook is coming into play. One very important point is that it guards f7. So that if, let's say, bishop c3, then black can just take here straight away, and that rook, revealed by the pawn advance, protects f7. That's beautiful. So in this position, Gukesh played queen b5, attacking the rook on e8, and rook e7. There we go. From split rooks, we get beautifully connected rooks, and this is the way to do it, not rook a5. And magically, that just makes sense of black's position. So this bishop is attacked, needs to come back, and from d2, of course, it protects the pawn on e3. But now black has time to do a few things. In fact, it's possible to take on g3 straight away. This is very dangerous. But Giri played knight d6. Also very strong. So attacking the queen. And after queen takes b6, knight takes e4. And you can see that the king is starting to look rather exposed. Now, this is the problem with playing pawn to e3. Yes, it opened lines for white, the f-file. But now, with white's initiative kind of petering out, then the king is starting to look very unfortunately placed, particularly as the light-squared bishop has gone, and this bishop is waiting in the wings. Let's see. Rook takes rook, rook takes rook, queen c6, attacking these pieces, but queen g4 defends both these pieces. And watch out, this h-pawn is waiting as well, just to further weaken white's king. So queen takes c5 played, rook c4, hitting the queen, queen d6. Queen d5 was the only chance, actually, to prevent the bishop from coming here. But queen d6, queen e4, and with Giri claiming the long diagonal, this is desperate for white. King f2 played, bishop b7. So you can see the queen is going to come in on one of these squares, and it's the familiar battery of bishop and queen. Rook f1, rook c6, so that's preparing to swing the rook to f6. Queen d8 check, king h7 forced, So rook f6 is now the threat. Therefore, bishop c3, preventing rook f6. However, there was a very neat finish. Well, I don't know. Do we need another think and drink moment? You can always pause the video. Black to play and win. Very neat finish from Anish Giri. Rook takes bishop. Queen g2. And very nice move to finish the game. Bishop a6, and Gukesh resigned. Why? Because the rook is attacked by bishop and queen. Mate is also threatened. And if rook f2, then the rook is picked up like that. And obviously, black is winning easily. Whew. I think that was a tremendous game by Giri, who really managed to control the position pretty well. And it was in spite of a lot of imbalance in the position. And he took his chance. But Gukesh, I thought he was just a bit too loose somehow. He didn't need to play e3, but once that happened, my feeling was that in practical terms, that positions like this are just a bit too dangerous for white, actually, with the king exposed. These pawns aren't beautiful either. You can see that that win has bounced Anish Giri off the bottom of the table, and he's now on 3 out of 7, along with Gukesh and Ergaisi. But at the top, Noribek Abdusattorov extended his lead with a convincing victory over Vincent Keimer. Big win there. And Sindarov still in second position, 4.5. And another excellent win for Yağız Edomuş, the 14-year-old prodigy from Turkey, who defeated Arjun Ergaisi. So Edomuş is now on 4 points.